All right, on December 3rd at about noon-ish, there was a press release that went out that there were 6 cases of Omicron discovered in southeast Nebraska. And within about 10 minutes, I started getting text messages asking, was that you? And the answer is yes. So it was announced that there was a family of 6. One of the members had traveled to Nigeria, potentially picked it up there, and come back and reinfected the rest of the family. So it's all my fault. From all accounts, or from all perspectives, it does look most likely that I picked it up either in Nigeria or on my way home from Nigeria. The good news is that tomorrow is the last day of quarantine for the rest of my family, and it appears like nobody else in southeast Nebraska has been infected, at least not because of us. So I'm doing this little video just to put out some of the basic information, partially just for the inquiring minds, the people that are asking questions. In fact, we're getting a lot of questions, and so maybe this would just be good to answer all those questions at once instead of repeating all of the answers. But also, maybe more importantly, we do probably all expect that while Omicron is dead in Nebraska for now, or we think, it's probably going to come back, not just in Nebraska, but all of the states. If this information can help the people out there to prevent future cases, or to make future cases more mild, to help people make wiser decisions to stay safe, then great. That's why I'm doing this video. So the first thing that I want to do is just pull up my calendar of the events. We went over all of this with the health department. There were people from the CDC there, probably spent 2 hours, and then with follow-up phone calls, at least 3 hours at a time. I'm going to get you up on the calendar as fast as I can to November 22nd, because that is the day that that I left, or that I started my journey back from Nigeria. Just coming up to that, the reason that I'm kind of skipping everything else, if you look at this, I went to San Diego on November 7th, and in order for me to go to Nigeria, I had to have a negative test before I went. That was on November 9th. The day after arriving in Nigeria, I had to have a negative test. So I did that at a very nice, developed hospital in Uyo, one of the nicest ones in the country. A week later, I had to have another test. That was on the 20th. That test came back negative. And then for me to get on the plane to come back to satisfy the U.S. requirements, since I'm not vaccinated, I don't have any vaccines for COVID, I had to have a negative test 1 day before getting on the airplane, and I did that on November 21st. Okay, so it should just be noted that my time in Nigeria, I did travel with 2 other Americans. One of them is from Minnesota, one is from Wisconsin. One of them is fully vaccinated, one of them is not vaccinated at all. Neither of those got COVID, any of the variants to our knowledge. It should also be noted that on our trip back, once we got on the flight from Lagos to Atlanta, that was a 12.5-hour flight, our seats were not even close to each other. We couldn't get seats together. So pretty much from that point on, I didn't see them again. So that might kind of lead more towards the theory that I picked it up on that airplane, or maybe on my second flight, which was from Atlanta to Omaha, which I find that to be even less likely for whatever reasons. Okay, so just another piece of information. While I was in Nigeria, I was pretty thorough to ask as many people as I could. I said, have you had COVID? And not a single person I spoke to said that they had had COVID. And I would also ask them a follow-up question. Do you know anybody that has had COVID? Not a single person has had COVID that I met, or even knew somebody that had COVID to their knowledge. So let me just go back to November 22nd. November 22nd, that morning, I was in the town of Uyo, which is a Akwa state, and we flew together, the three Americans. Our seats were together on that flight. It was a 1-hour flight to Lagos. We had kind of a long layover in Lagos, So normally on a domestic flight, you come into the domestic airport in Lagos and then you have to take a taxi or get a ride over to the international airport. And since we had such a long layover, we decided to go and spend a little bit of time in a nearby hotel. It was just about 10 minutes from the airport. Figured it was just a little bit of solitude and a little bit less stressful. Worked out really well. So then later that night, I forget, around 8 or 9 o'clock or something like that, we finally made our way to the international airport in Lagos. That was Monday night, the 22nd. You'll see that our flight was not until the 23rd. That's because the flight was delayed 2 hours. It was supposed to be that night, November 22nd at 11:45. It ended up flying at 12:45 a.m. on the 23rd, Lagos to Atlanta. I would like to point out on that flight, a mixture of Nigerians and Americans, maybe some other nationalities. I kind of feel like everybody was very compliant in following the guidelines. In the Lagos airport, didn't see people wearing their masks a whole lot, not in the airport so much, but on the flight, people were very compliant. There were a couple of times I remember seeing the flight attendant coming down the aisle and maybe corrected one or two people and said, hey, make sure to put the mask over your nose. No fights or arguments about that. But you know, it's a 12-hour flight. You can't expect that everything was perfect. So that's a long time for people to keep their masks on. I don't want to say it was perfect. I don't want to say that I was perfect, but I feel like I did a good job. All right, so that was the flight. Came in to Atlanta early in the morning. Again, I didn't see those other two Americans that were with me, except just like, oh, hey, see you later. And at the Atlanta airport, I was only there for like, I think my layover was like an hour and 20 minutes. I had to book it because I had to go through customs, get my luggage, go through customs, recheck in my baggage, and get on the other flight. I literally ran through the airport and got to the gate, had my mask on the whole time, and it was time to board. I didn't have time to get any coffee or anything like that. I was a little bit sad about that. I was looking forward to that. But got on the flight. We're on November 23rd. My flight from Atlanta to Omaha, it was a 2-hour flight. It seems like we arrived in Omaha around 10 or 11, I forget exactly. My wife and my daughter picked me up at the airport, drove back to our town. I had 15 minutes to clean up, take a shower, and then I went to the school play. I said it was here at 1 p.m. on the 23rd. I don't know if it was exactly 1 p.m. You might have a picture in your mind of a school play of a bunch of people sitting in an auditorium shoulder to shoulder. That's not what it was like. It was very spread out. This was a school day. There were very few parents there. I think maybe like 5 or 6 families were there. It was more for the school that were there, and some of the parents that weren't able to go to the previous performances were there, but we were all very spread out. So that was one event that I went to where I could have potentially spread it to somebody else. Then just kind of going through quickly here, November 24th, in the evening, there was an ecumenical church service in town. Our big town with 4 churches, we came together, had a 45-minute service the night before Thanksgiving. At this point, I was tired, had jet lag for sure, was not suspecting any symptoms. I'd had 4 negative COVID tests. I had not met anybody who had even ever had COVID, except for, I guess, the Americans that were with me. They had previous infections. I said one was vaccinated and one wasn't. I really did not have any reason to think that I had COVID. Didn't have any symptoms besides being tired. But after that church service, when I went to lay down that Wednesday night on the 24th, that was when I realized that I was sick with something. Still didn't think it was COVID. There were a couple of other people I interacted with on the 23rd and the 24th. I'm not really going to go into that. We've been in contact with them. This is now, 10 or 11 days later. None of them have experienced any symptoms whatsoever. The health department knows everybody we were in contact with, and they're also contacting just to ask them a gazillion questions also. So we're pretty sure that our 6 cases that we brought, or the case that I brought and spread to my 5 other family members here in our house, that this is the end of it for now, at least, thankfully. Okay, so Thanksgiving. I don't remember exactly what time it was on Thanksgiving, but at one point I knew that this was more than a cold. I was sick, and still didn't think it was COVID. It's getting close to flu season. I actually suspected it was the flu, maybe even malaria. I'd only had 1 or 2 mosquito bites in Nigeria. I've had malaria before, so I know what it feels like, and it kind of felt like the onset, and I've had the flu before. So I called the, I knew that I was sick, let me just say. I didn't call the doctor yet, it was the next day. But I knew that I was sick, and I was down. For all Thanksgiving, let me just say, for Thanksgiving, I pretty much I was either in bed or I was in the recliner. That's how I felt. And pretty much almost the same for Friday the 26th. So on Friday the 26th, I knew I should go and get tested. I called the clinic and I said, hey, I want to get tested for the flu. You should probably test for COVID too, just in case. And so I did, and yeah, they responded back and said that it was COVID. So when we got to Monday, the November 29th, the rest of our family members were having symptoms. I knew that I had tested positive for COVID. I knew that I had been in Africa, although not like South Africa, where a lot of the other cases were reported and in those other countries down there. But I thought it would be good to just go ahead and call up the health department, explain the situation, and suggest that we get the whole family tested for COVID, and also that they do the sequencing on that. And of course, they just thought that was a good idea too. And at this point, our family, we were all in quarantine. Once I tested positive and the others started showing symptoms, we did not interact with anybody after that. There was one small exception which we dealt with, and we've talked about and taken care of that, but nothing significant. We were pretty much alone, the 6 of us in our house almost the whole time, or outside. So on November 29th, we did have the family tested. We had to wait several days. You can see that it was December 2nd, that was Thursday, where all of the results came in, and all 6 of us tested positive for COVID, and we had to wait one more day to confirm the sequencing that all 6 of us also had Omicron. And then 10 minutes later, the press release went out, and bam, I started getting text messages, because we're in a small town. Everybody was like, that was you, wasn't it? In a friendly way. So next, what I would like to do, I just want to show this picture, this chart. I think that our 6 cases are kind of interesting because we have a variety of permutations of different types. And so you can just look at this chart for yourself. I created different names, I'm Paul, by the way. My name is Paul, and I put different names for the other family members. You guys all know who we are, but it was just kind of fun to do it this way anyway. So I made up some good names. But if you look at that first column under the vaccination, most of us were not vaccinated. One of us was fully vaccinated. Pfizer, just 3 months ago, or just a little over 3 months ago, August 21st. So both full shots, fully vaccinated by Pfizer. So you had vaccinated and unvaccinated. If you look at the second column, you'll see that some of us, it was confirmed that we had natural immunity. There was actually one of us that never tested positive for COVID. That was like a year ago. Most of us, 5 of us, had COVID. There was one person that did not test positive, even though there were some mild symptoms. So did they just have a mild enough case they didn't test positive? We don't really know. And the other third column here, there were a couple of us that were long haulers, and that extended all the way up until April of 2021. And, the question that you would maybe have, which we don't know the answers to, is how that would affect natural immunity or being more susceptible to having harder cases in the future. There's probably medical arguments to go either way, and I'm not a doctor. So you can take that for what it is. Since we found out that we had Omicron and people have been talking to us, I've heard people from both sides, people that are like super militant, everybody in the world should be mandated to get a vaccine, to people that are anti-vaccine. But you can't just take 6 cases and apply that to the whole world. So please, let's be honest. I think intellectually, let's wait till more information comes out before people start drawing those types of conclusions. So now I'm going to go through the symptoms, and I'll put this chart up here for you guys. The major symptoms, which were experienced by all of the 6 family members, you can read them there. A deep, dry cough, a heavy chest and congestion. It wasn't like a chest pain, like a heart attack. It was just kind of like that deep, like when you have a really, really deep cough, kind of like a discomfort in your chest because you're coughing, and the coughing is coming from your throat, and you know the stuff that's in there is like a lot deeper, and you just can't get there. That was the heavy chest and congestion. A lot of fatigue, which was similar to the previous cases that the other 5 of us had. A lot of fatigue, but then also, let me just say, like this case for all of us, there was much more dizziness than the previous case, and the way I describe it is kind of like hiking at a high altitude. You know, if you're if you're a flatlander, if you're from Kansas or Nebraska, and then you go up to a 14,000 footer in Colorado, you feel lightheaded. That's how we feel like almost all the time. So, and then also there was a fever that varied among the family members. The maximum was, I said 100.3. Actually, there was one of us that had 101 point something. So, but it did kind of vary. Still, mostly just a mild fever. So those were major symptoms experienced by all of 6 family members. Some of the other minor symptoms that were experienced from some and not all, you can see them there. Some chills, loose stools. For it to be technically diarrhea, I was told that you have to have like 3 runny stools in a row. Nobody had that, but there were loose stools, runny, watery stools. Some headaches, sore throats. This was interesting. This one was me, I'll confess. And this might have just been something else. Can't really say it was COVID, but it just seems kind of coincidental. Really super persistent hiccups at night, 3 nights in a row. And I would like work to get rid of them, and they would go away for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they would come right back. And they wouldn't go away until I actually like laid down in bed to go to sleep. So 3 nights in a row. A couple of significant things to mention, and this has been mentioned by other people that have had the Omicron, is that there was no loss of smell or taste, whereas the 5 of us that had COVID a year ago, there was almost complete loss of smell or taste for at least a week, maybe for some people 2 weeks. That was for our family. Something else also on the positive side for this time, there was no shortness of breath. So a year ago when 5 of us had COVID, there were some of us that, you just feel like you're struggling to breathe. You're like just not getting enough oxygen. And so you're feeling winded. That was last year. This year, we didn't have any of that. We had coughs. We would get tired and fatigued, but not like in the sense like you're struggling to get that oxygen. We have 2 oxygen sensors in the house. All of the readings, all the family members was always 96 or above. The last thing that I want to say about this, this just has to do with some of the reporting that's gone on with this. There's just a way that it's worded that I feel like is subjective and could potentially be misleading. And that is that people are saying that thank goodness that Omicron seems to be more mild than the other cases. So if your definition for mild is that nobody's going to the hospital and nobody is dying, if that's your definition of mild, then I'll buy that. And we're all happy about that. Like up to now, still, I don't think we've heard any reports of that. Although, if you want to ask me, the adjective that I would use for this would not be the word mild. Okay, so I lived in Nigeria for 12 years, and during those 12 years, I had malaria about 10 times. Some were mild, and some a mild case of malaria, and some were severe to the point where I kind of just wish like I would just die. I've had typhoid, whooping cough. Here in the U.S. in 2018, I had the bad strain of the influenza, so I know what that's like. So when I look at my personal experience with COVID this time compared to a year ago, I would actually say the symptoms were a little bit worse. So a year ago, I was telling people my experience with COVID was kind of like a mild flu or a mild case of malaria. This time, the first couple of days, let me just say the first couple of days were worse. And I would say it was more of like a regular case of malaria, or it was similar to when I had the 2018 flu. So for 2.5 days, I did not get out of the recliner or the bed. I didn't want to do anything. I was out. And then, thankfully, I kind of like went through a really quick recovery. You know, it kind of got to another plateau where I was just kind of like tired and dizzy all the time. And that's really where I'm still at. I have moments where I have energy, but today, I'm a pastor of a church, and so today I went to church and led the service. I did the sermon, and I was just absolutely dead tired afterwards. So if you feel like influenza and malaria are mild diseases, I'll accept that adjective, that this new Omicron case is a mild case. I think most of you would disagree with that. And in all fairness, I had been traveling. I had a really busy schedule for a couple of weeks, going to the West Coast, a time change in the opposite direction, and then going to Nigeria. And we were just absolutely busy the whole time. Coming back, you know, it was like 34.5 hours, doorstep to doorstep. I had, you know, hours that I was awake on each end of that. So I was tired. So I don't know, maybe my case this time was worse because my immune system was weakened from all of my exhaustion. The other family members, the other 5 of us that had COVID, I don't think that they would use the adjective mild either. Some of them, it was worse this time than it was a year ago in November of 2020. Some of them, it was maybe a little bit easier. Okay. So just in case there's anybody out there that is just thinking like, well, I've got natural immunity, I've been fully vaccinated, I've had a booster shot, and you're just thinking, I'm not going to worry about Omicron. When I get it, it's just going to be a mild case. Just want to let you know, you might be just a little bit surprised. So there you have it. I hope that everybody found this video to be interesting or maybe even useful. Thank you guys.